Greetings, mortals. It is I, Luther, here with another episode of Tapes of the Lost. In tonight's episode, we revisit a period of time when the skies over New York lit up with something that shouldn't exist. A silent object, larger than a football field, drifting through the stars. Seen by hundreds, denied by the government, and never explained. This is the story of the 1984 Hudson Valley UFO incident.
It was March 24th, 1983, just after 9 p.m. A man driving home along Route 84 near the town of Brewster, New York, noticed something strange above the tree line. At first, he thought it was a low-flying airplane, but it wasn't moving right. It was too slow, too big, and it made no sound. He pulled over, and then he saw it. A massive V-shaped object suspended in the sky, lined with bright white and red lights, not blinking, not pulsing, just hanging there. It was so large, he said, it felt like it was blotting out the stars. He wasn't the only one. Within minutes, the local police station was overwhelmed. Phones rang off the hook. Callers from multiple counties, Dutchess, Putnam, Westchester, all reporting the same thing. A gigantic, silent craft drifting overhead. One witness described it as a city of lights flying in formation. Another, a retired military pilot, told dispatch, "I don't know what I'm looking at, but that isn't one of ours." People stepped out of their homes. Traffic stopped. Families stood on front lawns in stunned silence. They weren't imagining it. The object was visible to dozens of people simultaneously, from different angles, different towns, and at different altitudes. It wasn't moving fast. That was part of the horror. It crept across the sky, slowly, deliberately, as if it was watching, choosing. Some witnesses said it passed so low they could see metallic panels on the underside. Others claimed it made a soft humming sound, barely audible, less like an engine, more like a frequency that made their skin crawl. But here's the part that still unsettles investigators to this day. No two accounts conflicted, not in shape, not in size, not in movement. This wasn't a trick of the light or a meteor. It was something structured, massive, and coordinated, and the sightings didn't stop that night. In the days that followed, more and more people came forward. Farmers, police officers, business owners, even local politicians. Each one recounting the same event, sometimes to the minute, describing the same eerie presence in the sky. Newspapers began to pick up the story. Local radio stations aired live call-ins from shaken witnesses. Some began dubbing it the Westchester Wing, while others went straight to the point, UFOs over the Hudson. But this wasn't mass hysteria. It wasn't a prank, and it wouldn't be over quickly, because this was only the beginning. Over the next year, the Hudson Valley would become the epicenter of one of the most intense, credible, and chilling UFO flaps in American history. Night after night, the object would return, sometimes alone, sometimes with others. And through it all, one question hung heavy in the air. Why here? It wasn't an isolated event. What happened in Hudson Valley wasn't a one-night-only anomaly. It was a wave, a full-blown, year-long cascade of sightings that spread across dozens of towns like wildfire. It's easy to dismiss a single report. Easier still to write off a shaky camcorder clip or a grainy photo. But this wasn't just one person, or 10, or even 100. By the time it reached its peak in 1984, over 5,000 people had seen something in the skies. And not just any people. We're talking about police officers, Pilots, teachers, engineers, lawyers, people with nothing to gain and reputations to lose. They all described the same thing: a massive boomerang or V-shaped object, lined with lights, drifting eerily low and moving in complete silence. It often appeared around 9 or 10 p.m., hovering over highways, neighborhoods, schools, sometimes as slow as 10 miles per hour. One witness said it was like a floating city. Another, a school teacher, described it as so large it felt like the sky opened up and something was watching. Entire families stood together in their driveways, watching it pass. People pulled over on highways and climbed onto their cars for a better view. Children cried. Dogs hid. The thing was close, low enough to make out structure, not just lights. One particularly chilling night in August 1984, residents in Kent, New York, flooded the police department with reports. A local dispatcher recalled receiving more than 75 calls in under an hour, each one describing the same slow-moving shape. One man said it hovered over his backyard for nearly 10 minutes, and that he could hear birds stop chirping. Everything went still, and no one could explain it. Local law enforcement tried. Some suggested experimental military aircraft. Others hinted at ultralight pilots flying in formation with synchronized lights. But as the sightings grew in scale and consistency, those explanations began to unravel. For one, the sheer size of the object ruled out conventional aircraft. Many said it spanned several football fields wide. Second, it made no sound. No engines, no rotors, no jet propulsion. Witnesses said it glided with an unnatural smoothness, like it was slipping through dimensions. And third, its behavior defied logic. It would appear over one town, then vanish, only to be seen 30 miles away seconds later. People began to gather nightly, waiting to see it. Skywatching became a local ritual. Some even brought camcorders and telescopes. But the object never came when expected. It moved when it wanted to. It watched who it wanted, and it left nothing behind but stories and silence. By the summer of 1984, residents of the Hudson Valley had stopped asking if something strange was in the sky. Now they wanted to know what it was. Night after night, the object kept returning, always slow, always silent, always enormous. Witnesses began sharing detailed descriptions, and what emerged was a chilling consistency. They weren't seeing random lights or distant stars. They were seeing a craft, massive, structured, impossible. The most common description? A V-shaped or boomerang-like structure, as wide as 3 football fields, with a solid body and rows of brilliant lights along the underside. Some saw red lights at the tips, others steady white or blue ones tracing the arc. One witness sketched what she saw, and it matched nearly a dozen others, right down to the strange grid-like pattern etched into the belly of the object. These weren't amateurs. Several were engineers, architects, commercial pilots, people trained to observe detail. And then there was the way it moved. It would hover motionless for minutes at a time, completely stationary. Then, without warning, it would drift forward with unnerving grace. No acceleration, no sound, just motion, like it was floating through the air on an invisible current. Some witnesses reported the lights blinking in sequence, as if communicating. Others described a strange, low-frequency hum. Not exactly sound, but something you felt in your chest, your teeth, your bones. And then there were the shadows. In towns like Mahopac and Fishkill, entire blocks went completely dark as the object passed overhead. Dogs howled, streetlights dimmed, car radios cut out. It was as if the thing carried its own atmosphere, distorting the environment as it moved. One of the most disturbing accounts came from a pair of night hikers near Kent. They said the object hovered directly above them for several minutes. They couldn't move. One of them said it felt like they were frozen in place, unable to speak, their thoughts slowing down as if time itself had warped. And then, just as silently, it was gone. The next day, they found circular indentations in the field where they'd been standing. But when police arrived, the marks were already fading. There was no heat signature, no radiation, nothing the authorities could catalog, just scorched grass and stories. Investigators began to rule out conventional explanations. Military aircraft? Unlikely. No known craft could hover that precisely or operate in complete silence. Plus, Stewart Air Force Base denied any involvement. Formation flying? Skeptics tried to claim it was ultralight aircraft flying in tight formation, but air traffic control had no records. Pilots would have needed perfect synchronization and a total disregard for FAA laws. And how did they manage to fly without engines being heard for miles? The theories didn't add up, but the sightings kept coming. And soon witnesses weren't just seeing the object, they were hearing something else. As sightings surged throughout 1984, the pressure mounted. People wanted answers. The media covered it. Talk radio lit up. And local law enforcement was running out of things to say. So the theories began. The first and most repeated explanation, ultralight aircraft flying in formation. A group of hobbyist pilots, they claimed, had been organizing night flights over the valley, decked out in colored lights, flying in tight formations to create the illusion of a massive craft. And on paper, it kind of made sense. There was, in fact, a group of pilots who flew out of nearby Stormville Airport. They even admitted to flying in formation on occasion, and some of them had experimented with lights for fun. But the moment you looked closer, the theory collapsed. For starters, the scale. Witnesses described an object spanning hundreds of feet. Block out the sky, huge. Ultralights are small, single-seat aircraft. Flying them in formation to mimic one enormous object would require flawless coordination, identical speeds, and precision lighting, in total darkness, without onboard navigation. Then there was the silence. Ultralight engines may be quieter than jets, but they're not silent. And yet hundreds of witnesses, including lifelong aviators, reported hearing nothing, not even wind, just an eerie vacuum of sound. Plus, those pilots weren't flying every night. And yet, the sightings continued, often in multiple locations miles apart, on the same night. And then came the contradiction that shattered the hoax narrative. Law enforcement officers and air traffic controllers saw the object too. They confirmed that it showed up where no known aircraft was scheduled to be. And radar often showed nothing, which led some to point fingers at the military. Was this a secret government test aircraft? A classified stealth project being flown under cover of night? Possibly. After all, the 80s were a hotbed of black-budget aerospace development. But again, the math didn't work. Military bases in the region, like Stewart Air Force Base and West Point, denied any involvement. No test flights, no known exercises, no surveillance ops. And more importantly, why test a craft over populated areas with no attempt to hide it? These weren't quick flybys. These were deliberate, repeated, public. And what kind of military craft hovers motionless for minutes at a time over residential areas and then accelerates straight up into the night sky? Some began to suggest mass hysteria, people seeing what they wanted to see, a shared illusion. But again, too many credible witnesses, too much overlap, too many independent accounts that matched, down to the structure and movement. Whatever it wasn't a prank. It wasn't a plane, and it wasn't going away. Then, as quickly as it began, it started to fade. Fewer sightings, fewer reports, until one day the skies went still again. But not before someone captured something real, a tape and a set of eyewitness testimonies that would leave even skeptics shaken. If there's one thing that makes the Hudson Valley UFO wave stand apart from other mass sightings, it's the evidence that survived. Not blurry photos, not word-of-mouth legends, but tape, audio recordings, and first-hand testimony from people who had everything to lose by coming forward. Let's start with the audio. In the summer of 1984, the Putnam County Sheriff's Office began recording calls coming into their 911 dispatch center during a particularly active night of sightings. The tapes still exist, and they are haunting. Caller after caller, all from different towns, describe the same scene. There's something hovering above the lake. It's not moving, it's just there, it's huge. It's got lights all the way around it. I don't hear anything. The fear in their voices is real. Raw, you can hear children crying in the background. You can hear silence hanging between the words. One woman whispers, "I think it's watching us." The most infamous moment on the tape comes from a police officer responding to the scene. As he steps out of his car, you hear him go quiet. Then, after a long pause, "Yeah, I see it too." It was confirmation, not just of sightings, but of disbelief from those trained to look for rational explanations. And then came the pilot. Tom Flanagan was a commercial airline captain with 25 years of flight experience. On July 24th, 1984, while flying over Westchester County, he noticed something on the horizon, a cluster of lights forming a chevron shape. He radioed it in. No aircraft were scheduled in the area, no radar signature, no transponder code. As the object moved closer, Flanagan estimated it to be at least 1,000 feet wide. It passed under his aircraft, silent, motionless. Then it disappeared. Not banked, not turned, vanished into the black sky like it had never been there. He later said, "I've flown over every major city in America. I've never seen anything like that in my life, and I hope I never do again." His account was never officially investigated. No government agency followed up, but his logbook shows a note: unidentified lights, triangular formation, no sound. And his wasn't the only account. Local news stations captured live interviews with entire families who watched the object drift above their homes. Teachers, EMTs, postal workers, all saying the same thing, often holding back tears. One man even tried to film it with a home video recorder. The footage is shaky, the image unclear, but you can see the lights, perfectly spaced, perfectly still. And then they move as one, like a single entity, not multiple aircraft. Despite all of this, no official investigation was ever launched. No congressional hearings, no statements from the Air Force. And that silence became its own kind of message. The tape was real. The people were real. The object, whatever it was real. And then, almost as suddenly as it arrived, it stopped. But the question no one could answer was, why? By late 1985, the sightings had slowed. Reports trickled down. The nightly sky watches that had once drawn crowds in the hundreds faded into memory. The Hudson Valley, once at the center of one of the most active UFO flaps in U.S. history, seemed to return to normal. But the truth is, the phenomenon didn't end. It just got quieter. There were still sightings, not as frequent, not as dramatic, but here and there, witnesses continued to report strange lights in the sky, always quiet, always moving against the logic of known aircraft. In 1992, nearly a decade after the wave began, a man walking his dog near Wappingers Falls reported seeing a triangle of lights gliding over the reservoir, moving so low it reflected in the water. He stood there in silence. It passed directly overhead. No sound, no wind, no explanation. He told no one for 10 years. And that's the thing. After the media lost interest and the authorities stopped answering questions, the people who saw these things stopped talking. Not because they forgot, because they knew no one wanted to hear it anymore. And maybe that's part of the mystery. Maybe that's how it was meant to end. Some believe it was all a government experiment, a stealth surveillance program so advanced it was mistaken for something alien. But that theory raises its own question. Why hasn't anything like it been seen since? Others say it was a test, not of technology, but of us. Something watching how we would respond, observing our reactions, our patterns, our fear. And then, there are those who think it never left, that whatever was drifting silently over the Hudson Valley is still out there, just less visible, more careful, waiting. Because things like this don't just happen once. When you gather thousands of witnesses across a region, including military personnel, pilots, law enforcement, and civilians, when you record their voices and match their testimonies, when you capture lights in the sky that behave like nothing we can explain, you don't forget it, even if you try. And maybe that's the most terrifying part of the Hudson Valley sightings. Not the lights, not the size of the object, not the silence, but the idea that it came, was seen by thousands, and then left without a trace, without a purpose, no message, no contact, just observation. And in that silence, what if the message was the silence?
The skies above Hudson Valley were once filled with something nobody could name. And maybe that's the point. Not every story ends with answers. Some just leave a shadow overhead and a question in the dark. Sleep well, mortals. And if you enjoyed tonight's tale, you know what to do.